You picture the dealership as your personal empire, glass showroom gleaming under morning light, your name painted proud across the sign outside. Rows of chrome and fresh paint waiting for buyers, a red ribbon at the door, and you standing there as the owner everyone envies quietly. You imagine the commissions rolling in every weekend, families driving off happy, and somewhere behind it all, money simply piling up in your account. That is the dream version, the one sold in franchise brochures and glossy YouTube thumbnails promising 6 figures a month from selling shiny metal. Here's what nobody tells you before you sign that franchise agreement and hand over millions for the right to wear this dream daily. The car business does not make its real money the way you think it does, and almost nobody walking onto that lot understands that yet. You assume every car sold hands the dealer a fat slice of profit, the way a jewelry store profits from every ring it sells. In reality, the average new vehicle sells for a gross profit of roughly $2,300, a margin under 3% total. Back in 2021, during the chip shortage, dealers averaged over $5,000 per new car, a peak that has since collapsed by half. By late 2025, some public dealership groups were reporting front-end gross profit per new vehicle falling under $300 in December alone. Sell a $30,000 car, and after floor plan interest, advertising, and staff commissions, you might clear barely more than a single mortgage payment. Floor plan financing itself quietly drains profit before a single customer even walks in, since every car on that lot sits there costing interest daily. Manufacturers ship inventory, whether demand exists or not, leaving the dealer holding financing costs on cars nobody has actually agreed to buy yet. Electric vehicle inventory has made this worse recently, with slower turnover rates leaving some dealers carrying heavier interest costs on unsold EV stock. So why do dealerships still exist, still expand, still get bought and sold for tens of millions of dollars across every American city today? Because the car sitting on the lot was never the actual product, no matter how much chrome and marketing convinced you otherwise for decades. According to NADA data, America's roughly 17,000 franchise dealerships generated over $1.3 trillion in combined sales during 2025 alone. That number sounds enormous, almost unbelievable, until you realize an average single dealership still nets a profit margin between 1 and 3%. 1 to 3%, the same razor-thin margin you would expect from a grocery store, not from a business moving $40,000 vehicles. So if the car itself barely pays the electric bill, where exactly does the actual money inside a car dealership quietly come from instead? New vehicle sales account for about 58% of a dealership's total revenue, yet they generate less than 26% of profit. Used vehicles look similar, contributing roughly 31% of sales but a comparable slice of total gross profit across the whole dealership. The department almost nobody outside the industry talks about, service and parts, quietly generates close to half of every dealership's total gross profit. Oil changes, brake jobs, warranty repairs, and parts markups, done on repeat for years, on every car that dealership has ever sold anyone. Then there is finance and insurance, the small office you sit in for 20 minutes signing paperwork after you thought the deal was finished. That single office, representing barely 15% of a dealership's total gross sales, produces somewhere between 40 and 60% of net profit. Extended warranties alone can carry commissions between 40 and 60% for the dealership, turned into fine print you barely skimmed while signing. Gap insurance, maintenance plans, paint protection packages, each one quietly stacking another $800 to $1,400 onto that finance office's profit. The car dealership was never really about selling you a car sitting proudly under those showroom lights you admired on your way in. It was about getting you into that finance office chair where the actual profitable business of the dealership truly begins to happen quietly. So who figured this out first? And how did an entire industry get legally protected long before most of us were even born yet? Back in the 1930s, manufacturers realized they could open their own retail stores and undercut every independent dealer selling their vehicles across America. Dealers organized, lobbied state houses for decades, and pushed through franchise laws banning car makers from selling directly to customers in most states. Those laws still stand today in all 50 states, protecting dealerships from the very companies whose vehicles fill every showroom floor nationwide currently. When Tesla tried selling directly to customers starting in 2013, it faced lawsuits and bans in state after state built to protect dealers. Tesla eventually won exemptions in several states, but only because it never had a franchise dealer network to begin with, legally speaking anyway. That fight exposed something most car buyers never questioned, that the dealer sitting between you and the manufacturer is not an accident of history. Rivian and Lucid later followed the same path Tesla carved, winning direct sales rights in select states simply by avoiding franchise dealer networks entirely. Legacy manufacturers like Ford and General Motors remain legally locked into the franchise system, unable to sell you a truck directly no matter what. It is a deliberately engineered legal moat, built decade after decade, keeping a percentage of every car transaction locked inside local hands permanently. Consider Carl Sewell, whose family dealership in Texas started in 1911 as a general store that also happened to sell early automobiles. His father survived the Great Depression by moving the business to oil country, proving that a dealership could survive almost any economic collapse. When Carl Sewell took over in 1972 at 26, his Dallas Cadillac store ranked a distant third in sales across the entire city. He built the business not around aggressive pricing, but around obsessive customer service, later writing a book that sold over 1 million copies. Sewell figured a single loyal customer was worth roughly $332,000 across a lifetime of repeat visits and referrals. That number reveals the quiet truth. Real dealership wealth compounds slowly through decades of repeat service visits, not through one flashy car sale. Sewell also quietly built substantial real estate holdings under his dealerships, land that appreciated for decades while everyone else focused only on car sales. That land, sitting beneath showrooms on busy commercial corridors, has become worth more in many cases than the car business built on top. So who actually gets rich from the modern car dealership? And it is rarely the person standing proudly behind the sales counter smiling widely. The finance and insurance managers, quietly closing warranty and protection product sales, often earn more personally than most salespeople on the entire floor. The service department, running on repeat customers for a decade after the original sale, becomes the dealership's most stable and predictable profit engine. The manufacturers themselves collect steady franchise fees, wholesale markups, and financing arrangements, all while pushing inventory risk downward onto individual dealer owners instead. Banks and captive finance arms quietly profit too, collecting interest on floor plan loans and consumer auto loans regardless of whether the dealership itself thrives. Large public groups like AutoNation, founded by Wayne Huizenga in 1996 with just 12 stores, now run over 300 locations nationwide today. AutoNation generated nearly $27 billion in revenue during 2024, yet its net income margin still landed under 3% overall. Even at massive scale, the underlying math barely changes, proving this business has always rewarded volume, real estate, and patience over raw margin. And quietly, underneath every successful dealership group, sits appreciating commercial real estate, often worth more than decades of accumulated car sale profits combined. The dealership was never really about the cars parked under those bright showroom lights, pulling customers through the door every single weekend morning. It was about the land beneath them, the repeat service contracts behind them, and the finance office quietly closing deals after the sale. So should you actually buy or open a car dealership? And the honest answer depends entirely on which version of this story you become. The optimist case looks like this: you secure a strong brand franchise, build a loyal service base, and slowly acquire the land beneath it. Over 15 or 20 years, service revenue compounds, real estate appreciates, and you eventually sell the entire operation for tens of millions of dollars. The realist case looks different. Thin margins squeeze you constantly, franchise fees drain cash flow, and most years you simply break even quietly. You survive by running lean, cross-training staff across departments, and treating the finance office as seriously as the actual car sales floor. The worst case looks like this: you underestimate floor plan interest costs, overextend on inventory, and a single bad sales quarter wipes out years of margin. Franchise agreements can trap you into buying inventory you never wanted from manufacturers who hold most of the real negotiating power in that relationship. Consolidation across the industry keeps accelerating, with large groups acquiring individual family dealerships for premium prices simply to gain scale and negotiating leverage. That consolidation trend quietly rewards existing owners who bought early and held real estate, while making entry nearly impossible for first-time individual buyers. Most new dealership owners underestimate how much capital sits locked in inventory financing before a single vehicle ever actually reaches the showroom floor. A single new dealership franchise can require anywhere from $1 million to over $10 million in startup capital before opening day arrives. That capital requirement alone eliminates most individual buyers, leaving this industry increasingly dominated by existing wealthy families and large publicly traded dealer groups instead. which means the dream of the self-made small-town dealership owner is quietly becoming rarer, replaced by consolidation and institutional ownership everywhere possible. Yet, pockets of independent success still exist, usually built by families willing to think in decades, not in single flashy sales quarters chasing. The Sewell family did not get rich from any single car sale. They got rich from 50 years of compounding trust and land value. That is the pattern hiding beneath almost every quiet fortune built in this industry, patience compounding slowly while everyone else chased the flashy sale. The car dealership was never really about the vehicle changing hands in that showroom under bright fluorescent lights every single business day. It was about who controlled the land, the repeat service revenue, and the paperwork office, long after the excitement of the sale faded. That is the same quiet pattern running through gas stations, pharmacies, and franchise laundromats, businesses that look ordinary but hide compounding assets underneath. The Silent Millionaire was never the loudest name on the sign outside. They were the name quietly listed on the property deed instead. They understood something most flashy entrepreneurs never grasp, that the visible product rarely holds the real money hiding somewhere just beneath the surface. If you walked into a dealership today assuming the salesperson gets rich from your car purchase, you now understand exactly why that assumption fails. The real winners sit quietly in finance offices, service bays, and property deeds far from the showroom floor where all the excitement happens. This same hidden pattern of quiet compounding wealth shows up again and again across industries that look completely ordinary from the outside looking in. Gas stations barely profit from fuel itself, yet the land and convenience store attached often quietly outearns the pumps sitting right outside constantly. Laundromats look boring and unglamorous, yet many quietly generate returns that outperform flashier businesses, precisely because nobody bothers competing for boring cash flow. Storage facilities, car washes, vending routes all follow the same silent formula: low visibility, low competition, and slow compounding wealth built over decades. The pattern always repeats itself. The flashy surface product draws in customers, while the boring back end quietly captures almost all the real profit. Car dealerships simply made that pattern visible first, because everyone assumed the shiny car itself was where all the actual money lived quietly. Once you see the pattern here, you start noticing it everywhere else, hiding in plain sight behind ordinary-looking storefronts across your entire city. That is the entire premise behind this series. Wealth rarely announces itself loudly. It usually sits quietly behind boring paperwork nobody wants to read. So next time you walk past a car dealership, look past the chrome and the flags, and imagine the finance office quietly working instead. Imagine the service bays running every single day for the next 20 years. Imagine the land slowly climbing in value beneath the entire lot. That is where the real dealership fortune actually lives, not in the showroom you admired, but in the boring machinery running quietly behind it. The next Silent Millionaire story hides somewhere just as ordinary, waiting behind a business you drive past every single day without noticing it. Maybe it is the corner pharmacy, maybe it is the neighborhood car wash, maybe it is a storage facility you have never once considered visiting. Maybe it is the vending machine route running quietly through office buildings, or the laundromat on the corner nobody has ever bothered noticing closely. Wherever it hides, the pattern stays identical: boring visible product, quiet profitable backend, and decades of patience compounding while everyone else chases excitement. Notice how none of these quiet fortunes were built overnight. Every single one required years of unglamorous repetition before the compounding became truly visible. That unglamorous repetition is exactly why most people overlook these businesses entirely, chasing louder opportunities while the boring ones quietly build lasting wealth instead. Keep that lesson close, because the next episode of this series will pull back the curtain on another industry hiding money in plain sight. Until then, remember that real wealth rarely wears a flashy sign. It usually sits quietly in the paperwork. Nobody bothers reading closely enough. The car dealership taught us that lesson clearly. Now let us go find the next quiet fortune hiding behind another ordinary storefront somewhere nearby. You now understand why that dealership down the street survives decade after decade, quietly compounding wealth long after the ribbon-cutting ceremony faded away. It was never about beating a competitor on sticker price. It was about outlasting them through service contracts and appreciating commercial real estate holdings. That is the quiet math behind every dealership sign you will ever pass again. Chrome outside, compounding patience, and land value working quietly inside. Every franchise fee, every warranty sold, every oil change scheduled years later, all quietly feed the same slow machine built decades ago by design. Remember the numbers. 1 to 3% margin on the car itself, nearly half the profit hiding inside the service department, instead entirely. Remember Carl Sewell. Remember the franchise laws from the 1930s. Remember that land beneath the lot often outearns every car sold above it. Remember that the loudest business on the block is rarely where the real fortune lives. It usually hides quietly in the paperwork behind it. Remember the finance office, remember the service bay, remember the land deed, because those three quiet rooms built more fortunes than any showroom floor. That quiet truth applies far beyond cars. It applies to nearly every ordinary-looking business you will ever walk past without thinking twice about it. So look closer next time, because somewhere behind that boring storefront sign, another silent millionaire is quietly compounding wealth while nobody else is watching.